Hi, Jim Humphrey here from Imminent Threat Defense Firearms Training, and this is how I did a basic disassembly on a tube-fed Winchester Model 77. As always, I'm going to check and double check that the firearm is unloaded and remove all live ammo from my work area. I have to tell you, this rifle was a challenge. If you have one of these rifles, I highly recommend you get one of these manuals from Cornell Pubs. Written by one of Winchester's design engineers, it's the best manual on any rifle I've ever come across, full of notes and drawings by the guy who designed the rifle. The Model 77 came in two versions, a tubular loading and a clip loading. Now, before you start jumping into the comments section, have a look at what Winchester themselves called it. See? Clip loading. I only point this out because I know it gets some people riled up. Anyway, it's not important because this rifle is the less common tubular magazine type, which from what I can see is a lot more complicated to disassemble than the clip type. So let's get into it. All that said, let me say this. Reassembly of this rifle involves some very challenging and frustrating techniques. Through careful editing and the magic of video, this will look simple. It isn't. Even I'm not going to take one of these apart again. Don't try this at home. For disassembly, it's important that the safety be engaged. Not just for the obvious reason, but for something unique to this rifle I'll show you in a minute. There are two screws on the trigger guard. Only the one in back has to be removed. And there's another in the middle of the stock. With those two screws removed, I can separate the stock and set it aside. Next, I'll remove the magazine follower. The barrel is held to the receiver with this locating pin. This rifle requires an extra set of hands, so it's a lot easier, and I mean a lot easier, to set it up with a vise. I'll use some nylon jaw liners to protect the barrel, and I'll clamp this table vise to the workbench to firmly hold the barrel. The locating pin just pushes out, and with it removed, I can separate the receiver from the barrel, though I have to be very cautious as this releases the operating slide spring. With the operating slide separated from the barrel, I can rotate and remove the magazine tube. With the receiver separated from the barrel, I can work on removing the operating slide from the carrier lugs. With the operating slide removed, the carrier just falls out. This silver tube in the carrier is called the feed throat. The bolt just slides out of the receiver. Inside the receiver is the striker, and it's spring-loaded, so I'm careful to keep the receiver pointed in a safe direction and insert a dowel rod to control the striker before I pull the trigger. This is why I engaged the safety earlier. The manual says to pull the trigger and release the striker before separating the receiver and the barrel. That might be a better way. On the top of the back of the bolt is the timing rod. The striker fits in this hole in the middle of the back of the bolt. Inside the receiver, there are two holes these rods have to engage. Getting these lined up during the reassembly adds some challenging elements. So I'll reinstall the striker. I use that dowel to compress the striker, and it will engage the trigger and stay in place. and I'll re-engage the safety. Now I'll reinstall the magazine tube. It just twists on, and it never hurts to put a little anti-seize where the barrel engages the receiver. These two T-slots in the bolt have to face down and engage the operating slide. The timing rod is at the top, and when it fitted properly, the bolt should be able to compress into the receiver. The carrier just drops in and fits up on this little ledge on the receiver. It takes some twisting and turning to get the lugs in the carrier engaged with the operating slide, and to get the operating slide feet into the T-slots on the bolt. But when it's done right, they should all lock together, and the bolt should be able to compress inside this receiver. Like this. Now, I have to simultaneously feed the operating slide spring onto the magazine tube while starting to press the receiver onto the barrel. This is where the vise really comes in handy. I found it easier to feed the open end of the spring first. With the spring on, I press the receiver just a little bit more while lining up the magazine tube into the receiver. Now, in order to get the receiver to move that last little bit, I need to get the feed throat lined up with the magazine tube inside this block on the receiver. Fortunately, the stock screw hole goes through, and I can reach in with a pin and nudge the parts around. When everything lines up, it goes together pretty easy. But this last 30 seconds of video was about 30 minutes of work. Not much to it after that. The lining pin goes in, stock goes on, a couple of screws, function check, and done. Well, I hope you found that interesting. I'm Jim Humphrey from Imminent Threat Defense Firearms Training. Thanks for watching.